Let me welcome you to a presentation on the organs present in the visceral compartment of the neck. In this presentation, the organs related to the respiration will be covered. So the objective is we'll first identify the visceral compartment of the neck, and then one by one we will discuss the organ those are related to the respiration. Pharynx is already discussed with the digestive tract organs. In the head neck region, we'll get the organs of the digestive system, organs of the respiratory system, thyroid gland, salivary glands, and the tongue. So here you see the visceral compartment is covered by the deep fascia, one layer, that is the visceral layer of the deep fascia. It includes a cylindrical area in the neck and contains the respiratory and digestive organs here, in addition to the thyroid gland. Today we will restrict ourselves to the respiratory organ. You can see the median section of the head neck region and showing the nasal cavity as level. Then is the pharynx indicated by the yellow line, and you can see the larynx indicated by the line and arrow, which continues below as the trachea and enters into the thoracic cavity. Let us start with the anatomy of nasal cavity. We will discuss the features present in the valves. So this red mark area anteriorly indicates the antronasal aperture. This is also known as nostril or nares. Another red mark is indicating the posterior nasal aperture. This is also known as corona. This section on the left side shown the septum, which divides the nasal cavity into right and left half. A coronal section, you can see the median septum. On either side there is nasal cavity. So each cavity has a roof, floor. This septum is the medial wall and one lateral wall. This total nasal cavity is divided into three parts. The anteriormost part is the vestibule, then is the middle part, which is also known as antrum, and the posterior part, who contains the several shelf-like projections and grooves in between them. The posterior part of the nasal cavity, the lateral wall, contains several features. That's why this area is relatively important. You can see the posterior part, and there are three shelf-like projections. Each is known as concha. So the lower one is the inferior concha, then middle and the superior concha are there. These are clinically also known as turbinates. Corresponding groove-like spaces are there. These are known as meatus. So below the inferior concha is the inferior meatus. Under cover of the middle is the middle meatus, and under cover of the superior is the superior meatus. You can see in this figure, this is the inferior meatus. Naturally above it is the middle, and just under the cover of the superior meatus is a superior concha is the superior meatus. You can see above the area above the superior concha, that is shaded yellow, is known as sphenoethmoidal recess. In the meatus and the sphenoethmoidal recess, several sinuses and other structures opens. The sphenoidal sinus opens into the sphenoethmoidal recess. The inferior meatus, it accepts the nasolacrimal ducts, opens into its anterior part. The middle meatus, you can see at the middle of this there is an elevation known as ethmoidal bulla, and under that a semicircular deep area is there. This is known as semicircular hiatus. On the summit of the bulla ethmoidal sinuses open, anterior and middle one. In the semicircular canal as hiatus, the maxillary sinuses open. Nasolacrimal duct opens into the anterior part of the middle meatus. In the superior meatus, the posterior ethmoidal sinuses open. This is the summary of the previous text. You see the nice figure where the turbinates means the concha are removed by cut sections and several areas are shown by yellow outline in which there are small openings are shown by changing colors. So in the sphenoethmoidal recess, the sphenoidal sinus opens. In the superior meatus, you will get the opening of the posterior ethmoidal sinus. The mid part, middle meatus, is most important because most of the openings are present here. The middle part of this has a cell elevation. This is known as bulla ethmoidalis, and a groove is surrounding its partly. This is known as semilunar hiatus. On the summit of the bulla ethmoidalis, you will get the ethmoidal sinus. This is usually the mid groove, and in the semilunar hiatus, the anterior part has the opening of the frontonasal duct, opening of the frontal sinus, and posteriorly the opening of the maxillary sinus. In between there will be opening of the anterior group of ethmoidal sinuses. In the inferior meatus, the anterior part has a large opening of the nasolacrimal duct. Change of epithelium is observed in the nasal cavity. So in this figure, the two ends are shown, the two openings. In between this area is the nasal cavity. The yellow shaded area is the roof, and part of the nasal septum that lies close to the roof is covered by the olfactory epithelium. This is a special type of sensory epithelium containing olfactory receptors. The anterior part, the anterior inferior total area, is lined by the skin. This skin is thin skin, contains a hair, so it is stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. This area is the vestibule. The middle part and the posterior part is lined by the pseudostratified epithelium. Larynx is the part of the airway that is working as the sphincter, means controls the air passes through contraction, and it is the organ of phonation. It extends from the dorsum of the tongue to the trachea, beginning of the trachea. It is connected proximally to the laryngopharynx. The opening is situated in the anterior wall of the laryngopharynx, and it continues as the trachea at the level of the lower border of 6 cervical vertebrae. So in adult, this larynx lies in front of the 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th cervical vertebra. In female and in children, it is a bit higher, but the vertebral level almost same. The skeleton of the larynx is formed by the cartilage. The series of cartilages are there. Some of them are paired and some of them are unpaired. Some of them are hyaline in nature and some of them are elastic in nature. So we should learn to classify it in this way. So cartilages that are unpaired are the thyroid cartilage, cricoid, and epiglottic cartilage. I'll label it on the figure. The right figure is seen from the side and the middle figure is from the posterior aspects. So this is the thyroid cartilage and this one is the cricoid cartilage. Here this is the cricoid cartilage and just above one on either side the larger cartilage is the thyroid cartilage, and lastly this is the epiglottic cartilage. So these are unpaired cartilage, single in they are relatively larger cartilages. Paired cartilages are relatively smaller. Of them, arytenoid is the largest one. This the labeling is shown the arytenoid cartilage. Cuneiform and corniculate cartilage is shown by a red circular line here on the apex of the arytenoid cartilage. Both of them lies, and the membrane between the thyroid and hyoid bone, this is known as thyrohyoid membrane. The lateral edge of the thyrohyoid membrane is thickened and the round circular red line has shown the position of trichiate cartilage. In other words, we can classify the cartilages as hyaline and elastic in nature. The hyaline cartilage includes the total thyroid, cricoid cartilage and basal part of the arytenoid cartilage. The elastic cartilage includes the total epiglottic cartilage, small corniculate and cuneiform cartilage and apical part of the arytenoid cartilage. This is epiglottic. Dense connective tissues are observed here. The flattened one are known as membrane and relatively thicker one are known as ligaments. The membranes and ligaments are situated outside the wall and some of them lies within just under cover of the mucosa. So those are known as intrinsic, and the membrane that extends beyond the larynx is known as extrinsic. So the first membrane, a larger membrane, lies between thyroid cartilage and hyoid bone is thyrohyoid membrane. Its anterior medial part is thickened and often known as thyrohyoid ligament. Epiglottis, the anterior surface, mostly the median part, is connected with the hyoid bone through hyoepiglottic ligament. This epiglottis is also connected with the thyroid cartilage in the midline by the thyroepiglottic ligament. The cricoid cartilage is connected to the tracheal ring, the first tracheal ring, through the cricotracheal ligaments. So these are extending from larynx to outside. The intrinsic membranes or ligaments lies deep to the membrane, mucous membrane. It is within the wall and strengthen the wall of the larynx. It's having the quadrangular membrane above the vocal fold area and cricovocal membrane below the vocal cord vocal fold. You see, vocal ligament is formed by the thickening of the cricovocal membrane above. The quadrangular membrane below thickens to form the vestibular ligament. So these are the thickened margins in case of ligament, vocal and vestibular, but total flattened area is known as membrane. Laryngeal inlet is an important area for the clinician. You can see the laryngeal inlet from the back and on the median section. The larger two figures are observed from the pharynx, and you can see the tongue and the oropharynx in the left figure, and the tongue clearly on the right figure. This has some features here. The interarytenoid notch is this one, is the uh, a curved line, curved fold of mucosa between the tip of the arytenoid cartilage. Then we'll get the aryepiglottic fold, means arytenoid tip to epiglottic base, and then we'll get the lateral margin of the epiglottis covered by the membrane, mucous membrane. So from the posterior to the anterior, we can serially say interarytenoid notch, aryepiglottic fold, lateral margin of the epiglottis up to the median margin. So this is on either side. We'll get these features in the thoracic, in the laryngeal. Inside the laryngeal cavity, there are some important mucosal foldings. So the features should be known clearly. This is the vestibular fold, is the upper part, and below is the vocal fold. In between these two is the ventricle of the larynx, and it is also known as sinus of the larynx. The part above the vestibular fold is the laryngeal vestibule, and the part below, the cavity part below the vocal fold, is known as infraglottic part. So we got two areas, one is above and another is below the folds, above the vestibular fold and below the vocal fold, and in between these two folds there is the laryngeal ventricle. So these are the three regions of the cavity of the larynx divided by two folds. Indirect laryngoscope is a procedure. The ENT specialist usually use a mirror that is obliquely placed to see the laryngeal opening, and through that want to see the vestibular and vocal folds. So this feature is seen by the mirror, and this is the place through this opening the arrow is showing. The doctor can see the feature inside the laryngeal cavity. So that feature should be studied. So this is the procedure is known as indirect laryngoscopy. In the procedure indirect laryngoscope, the doctor sees this middle figure is showing the view through the mirror. So how the doctors see showing the direction, the white arrow is showing the direction, the mirror actually is directed in this direction. So the doctor can see both vocal and vestibular fold and epiglottis. You see the tongue is on that side, so doctor is on that side. Our side is doctor's anterior aspect. So the tongue, this is the tongue, so the doctor will see the epiglottis just behind the tongue, and this total inlet is visible. Through the inlet, doctor can see the vestibular fold, which is shorter than the vocal fold, which projects more. So the gap is seen between the vocal folds and between the vestibular folds. So this gap between the vestibular folds known as the rima vestibuli, and the gap between the vocal fold is known as rima glottis or glottidis. The white arrow here is indicating the rima glottis. Epithelium also have some chains in this laryngeal cavity, laryngeal mucosa. The non-keratinized stratified squamous is present in some restricted areas. It is the lingual surface of the epiglottis shown by the green arrow on the left figure, and shaded green area epiglottis of the laryngeal surface close to the apex, and over the vocal fold and the vestibular folds marked green is lined by non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Rest of the part is lined by pseudo-stratified epithelium. The larynx has two sets of muscles, the intrinsic and the extrinsic. The extrinsic muscles extend from outside into the wall of the larynx. The very name indicates their extension from like sternothyroid muscle extends from the sternum to the thyroid cartilage. Thyrohyoid means this muscle is extending from the hyoid bone to the thyroid cartilage. The intrinsic muscle remains within the wall of the larynx. These are cricothyroid. You can see these photographs. This is the muscle extending from the cricoid cartilage to the thyroid. In the same way, the name indicates the positions, extension from which cartilage to which cartilage. These are the photographs of intrinsic muscles. The above one is from the side. The lateral plate of the thyroid cartilage is removed in the lower right figure, and posterior view on the is shown in the lower left figure. Larynx receive both motor and sensory supply. The motor supply, all the intrinsic muscles of the larynx except cricothyroid is supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve. The cricothyroid muscle is supplied by the external laryngeal nerve. The sensory supply up to the vocal fold, the area is from the above is supplied by the internal laryngeal nerve. Below the vocal fold is supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve. The internal laryngeal nerve includes the vocal folds too, but below the vocal fold, the recurrent laryngeal. Paranasal sinuses are the air containing cavities that lies in the bones around the nasal cavity, and all of them open into the nasal cavity. These are lined by the pseudostratified ciliate epithelium, which is continuous with the epithelium of the nasal cavity. So these are clinically very important spaces that are extension from the nasal cavity, as well as their mucosa is continuous with the nasal cavity. So the disease can spread into the mucosa rapidly, and also the fluid can remain collected inside these spaces, creating some problem. There are pairs of paranasal sinuses, as well as some of the sinuses are more in number. There are two frontal sinuses present in the frontal bone. Ethmoidal sinuses are many in number, maybe up to 20. Sphenoidal sinuses are two in the body of the sphenoid bone, and maxillary sinuses are present in the body of the maxilla, and they are two in number. This one is the frontal air sinus. Ethmoidal sinus is present deep to this area. Sphenoidal sinus is this one, and deep to this area. It is situated in the base of the skull. And maxillary paranasal sinuses lie by the side of the nasal cavity and all opens into the nasal cavity. Their mucosa is continuous with the nasal cavity, so the secretion and for the functional continuity, this is very important that we should know the connection between the paranasal sinus with the nasal cavity. The first one I am showing is the sphenoidal sinus. See, this is opening into the sphenoethmoidal recess, which just we have discussed that superior concha is there, and above and posterior to that is the sphenoethmoidal recess. So below the superior concha is the superior meatus. This superior meatus has the opening of posterior group of ethmoidal sinus. The middle meatus is below the middle concha, and this space has an elevated area. This is bulla ethmoidale, and a groove semilunar in shape. This is semilunar hiatus. So in its over the bulla ethmoidale, the ethmoidal air sinus, two grooves, an anterior and middle groove opens here. The maxillary air sinus, that is the largest sinus, opens into the hiatus semilunaris, and in the anterior part the frontal sinus has one duct, and that opens into the anterior part of the middle meatus through the frontonasal duct. Paranasal sinuses are responsible for making the skull lighter. The large skull has so many air containing pockets, and it is responsible for adding resonance to the voice, which we can change uh, to make the voice relatively better. We can condition our inspired air in the respect of changing the humidity and temperature to make the air comfortable for the lung. After birth, the shape of the face is changed, facial skeleton grows up with the inflation of the air containing sinuses. Let me discuss the epithelium of the pharynx together so that we understand the gradual change of epithelium. Behind the posternasal aperture is the nasopharynx, and it is lined by the epithelium similar to the respiratory epithelium, means main epithelium of the respiration. And behind the oral cavity is the oropharynx. This is having similar epithelium to the oral cavity, and it is non-keratinized stratified squamous. The laryngopharynx is also having the same epithelium, and it is having the opening of the larynx. So close to the opening of the larynx means epithelium of the epiglottis, the laryngeal aspects as well as lingual aspects. Over the vocal and vestibular folds are the non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Rest of the part of the larynx is lined by respiratory epithelium, means pseudo-stratified ciliated epithelium. So to sum up the epithelium, this anterior-inferior part of the nasal mucosa is having the lining epithelium of the skin, means epidermis, which is stratified squamous keratinized epithelium with hair follicles. The roof and adjacent part of the nasal septum as well as lateral wall is having olfactory epithelium, which is a sensory epithelium. The part stained greenish is the oropharynx, is lined by non-keratinized stratified squamous, as well as the part over the epiglottis and over the vocal fold as well as vestibular fold of the larynx having the same epithelium, means non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. So rest of the part indicated nasal cavity, nasopharynx and the larynx is lined by pseudo-stratified epithelium, and this is considered as the major epithelium of the respiratory tract, and this is also known as respiratory epithelium. The greenish stained area supplied lined by non-keratinized stratified squamous, that is from the oral cavity over the tongue, oropharynx, laryngopharynx and continuing into the esophagus. The trachea starts from the lower end of the larynx, means from the cricoid cartilage. The upper part of this trachea remains in the lower part of the neck, and this is having histologically having a wall with several layers. The inner layer is known as mucous pore, so it is having some lining epithelium. This is lined by the respiratory epithelium, which is pseudo-stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. This is under this epithelium is the lamina propria, which is loose connective tissue containing some glands, and deep to this part is the C-shaped cartilage hyaline in nature. This cartilage is present anteriorly on either side. The posterior end of the cartilage is connected by a layer of smooth muscle known as trachealis muscle. Outside that, the whole trachea is covered by a thick layer of connective tissue. It is dense connective tissue. Pseudostratified epithelium is the major type of cell in the respiratory tract. This is in the figure is showing the epithelium pseudostratified in nature. So it is the main epithelium of the respiratory tract. That's why it is known as respiratory epithelium. Pseudostratified epithelium means the cells are of different shape, so the nucleus varies in different levels, though they are arranged in a single layer. In histological section, because of the different level of the nucleus, the epithelium seems to be a multi-layer, though it is a simple epithelium. That's why it is known as pseudo. Pseudo means false. In the respiratory epithelium, this type of pseudostratified epithelium contains different types of cells. Let us discuss these cells one by one. The first cell is the major type of cell is the columnar cells, who are ciliated in nature. These are the main cells. So this is column in shape, and nucleus is oval in line, and the nucleus is oval, and the long axis of the nucleus lies in the long axis of the cell. The second is the goblet cell. Already we are acquainted with the goblet cell. This is having narrow base, expanded superficial part, and nucleus lies close to the base. These are mucus secreting cells. Third cells are Clara cells. These are the non-ciliated columnar cells. Brush cells. These are also columnar cells with some cilia or microvilli on the apex. These brush cells are different from the ciliated columnar epithelium. They have cilia, and brush cell has microvilli on the apex. Some cells are undifferentiated. These cells are a bit rounded in shape and lies close to the base. They actually divide and can differentiate it into any of the four forms mentioned above. Argentophin cells are the small rounded basally placed cells. They are endocrine cells present here. Thank you very much for remaining with the presentation.